Time has come once again to speak as witches and wizards do. I'm Daniel Dubois,
And I'm Michaela Gaffinstone.
and we're your hosts for the Think Like a Wizard podcast. Welcome to season 2, episode 7. And so that means officially, by the numbers, we have now done as many episodes in season 2 as season 1.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And to be fair, there's a lot more content in season 2 than there is in season 1. So we've long since passed season 1 in all metrics. So,
I think season one was a great introduction to what we're doing together, even though you didn't know that's what it was at the time.
well, that's the thing, it's true.
Yeah.
To remind the audience that Michaela and I did not know each other really before this. I think
Right.
a week, like we had one call together with for something else. And that was about the extent of our interaction, other than possibly in a Facebook group. But
Yeah, there really wasn't much interaction, but it was like, yeah, let's go.
so it's also interesting, right? So they're not only like getting to, as we say, here, speak as witches and wizards do, but this is also you're watching basically in real time me and Michaela's relationship unfold as well.
Yeah, which is so cool, right? Because it's all real time. Everything is real time. Neither of us know what the other one's going to say ahead of time or where we're going with this, but we're both here for it. So
Yeah.
really cool.
Right. So I want to start with this because this is interesting, and this is what I was saying earlier. So Michaela and I were both on a professional related call, and so is my student for my class. Now I'm going to ask Michaela a question. Did you see what I was doing while she was sharing her big share?
I did not. I was focused on
Right.
her.
I was channeling.
Ah, I need to go back and look at that call now.
Yeah. It wasn't a surprise. It wasn't as well. I mean, it was a bit of a surprise that she shared like she did, but it wasn't because this when I teach a class, there's usually a spirit that wants to teach. So, and the spirit that's been teaching her class was the one that prompted her to speak in the first place. Like we spoke after the call, and she's like, I have no idea what caused me to say that, and I'm like, well, I've been channeling the whole call pretty much, so I know what prompted you to say that.
And the thing is, what she shared was so incredibly helpful
Yep.
for everybody else that I think two of us put our hands down because we were
Mm.
like, oh, okay, thank you. She was bringing forward something that was important for pretty much everybody on the call. So that was very good of her to do that.
Yep.
And also, really, it was a great experience. Quite,
Mhm.
quite the way to start the day from my end, because it was
Yeah.
8 a.m. for me.
Mhm.
So that's like, wake up, wake up.
Yeah. Because it's interesting. I almost expected someone to make a comment because for most of the call, my eyes were closed. And like, if you look a little close, you can see my eyes twitching, but I was channeling the whole time because, like I say in the course I'm teaching, my official title is not so much teacher as it is voice for the spirits that want to teach. So,
Mm.
so
I'm
that means
definitely
until
going to go and I'm going to go and look at that again. I have the
yeah,
privileged ability to do that.
mm,
So
yeah,
yeah, it'll be very cool.
yeah. So the idea is until she can recognize these things for herself, I'm the voice to which they speak to her. So, but it
Mm.
looks like they got the prompt. They prompted her anyways. So,
Yeah, and it was a powerful share.
yeah.
It was really, I was glad I got up and came for that call. Because yesterday was a crazy day,
Mm.
and I don't even want to go into it, but it was everything from the death of a friend
Right.
to, the rug pulled under me from under me professionally in a certain way, and there was all kinds of things going on. It was just a very crazy day yesterday, and I was sort of a little apprehensive about how today was going to go based on, my expectations and the reality of yesterday were two
Right.
very, very different things. And so this morning it was like, do I want to start my day that way? And I felt that, yeah, yeah, actually I should. And I didn't know why I felt that way,
Mm.
but okay, I'll go with it. And then I got on the call and I was like, okay, this is why I'm here. This is
Mm.
really worth being here for. So that worked very well.
Yeah. It's interesting. Just now, a bunch of spirits shuffled around. The spirit who was on the call this morning to prompt Lata left. And then the dragon that did the episode of Here Be Dragons, so the last episode posted. Well, no, because never mind. That's confusing. We're doing a couple episodes ahead, so it's the last posted episode as of this recording. But so it showed up for a second, and then the dragon that I've been working on for another dragon I've been working around with, the one that I said the nurturing female dragon, she showed up for a second. I think they're trying to figure out who wants to take control of this call.
It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are we calling this call?
What's that?
What are we calling this call?
That's a good question. I don't think there is a name for this episode. So whatever shows up in
Ooh,
the text when you, like I
this
said,
is the mystery box.
yeah, like I said, I had a bunch of ideas. Maybe talking about fear, maybe talking about, because that's one of the last things that my student and I were talking about, because that was the last class was about fears. So we talked about fear. And so she was already actually in a state of mind to share.
Okay.
But
Well, fear is an excellent
then,
topic.
yeah, well, on that topic, so this is one of the things I put in the description of what fear is. So, what's fear's main reason for existing?
To make you aware.
Hmm. Yeah. So, what I said was, and I put it in these words: since your emotions are your subconscious way of communicating, what is it communicating with fear? And what it's communicating is it needs more data.
Hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can go with that.
It doesn't have enough information to know if what it already knows is good enough to handle the situation. And then if it doesn't have that, then it needs more information to figure out how to come up with a plan. So,
Hmm. Okay. And I am aware, if you will, that awareness comes from fear. That's the sort of root cause of it, if you will.
mm,
So when people say, "Oh, I want to fear nothing," it's like, I don't know that you do. I
well, that's true.
don't know that that's actually what you want. But we can work on the definitions there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because, like, I've watched far too much science fiction over the years, far too much fantasy, far too many superhero things. And certain things that have come up as superpowers is being fearless and having no sense of pain. Two things which in the real world will get you killed.
Yes, absolutely. That would be dire. And people that don't have pain are in an awful lot of trouble because you
Yeah.
have no guidance whatsoever as to what is safe, what isn't, and what's damaging you and what isn't. Like that is a terrible curse, actually, to have no
Yeah.
pain. You need pain. It's kind of necessary. It's a big feature of our survival.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, when you watch interviews with people who have no sense of pain, it's like, was it one person ended up with a probably like a 3-inch piece of wood stuck in them because they didn't notice it when they bumped into something. It's like, jeez.
Well, I can give you some real-time examples of when I worked in
Yeah.
tropical diseases.
Okay.
My specialty within tropical diseases was leprosy. And
Okay.
there's plenty of leprosy still around. People
Mhm.
think it's gone. I don't know where they think it went, but it hasn't.
Right.
It's still here. And we would have people coming into the tropical diseases hospital with leprosy all the time. There's always two, three,
Mhm.
maybe more people in with this condition. And typically, the first thing that brings you to get a diagnosis is anesthesia of the hands and feet. And someone has
Right.
been leaning on a hot radiator, or they stepped on a nail, they
Mm,
got an infection, they got a burn, and they didn't feel it. And
mm,
that's the first thing that that person comes in with. And when you've been working with leprosy for a while, you kind of take one look and it's like,
right.
all right, well, we'll run the blood tests, but I know where this is going.
Yeah.
And you are typically correct. And the interesting thing with something like leprosy is, or leprosy actually, not
Mm.
something like, is it takes 10 to 15 years to show up. The incubation period is that
Oh,
long.
yeah.
Yeah. And that could be an entire podcast episode on its
Yeah.
own, talking about that. But the fact that somebody's slowly been losing the sense of feeling in their hands and feet and haven't realized it until something awful happens.
Yeah.
And that's when they get the diagnosis. So, again, really important to have that sensation, right? You need to know if you're stepping on a nail,
Yeah. It's absolutely true. And it's
right?
funny because I'm thinking no one started this episode thinking they were going to hear about leprosy.
People never think they're going to hear about leprosy, and I've had some very interesting dinner time
Yeah.
conversations about leprosy. It's uh it's a fascinating topic, which is why I ended up focusing on it, because there's so many aspects to it,
You
like
know,
the
yeah.
social, the psychological, as well as the just physical care. And it's lifelong, right? It's
Yeah.
ongoing.
It's funny because, the minute you said that, well, you know the feeling because you're just describing it, but when you get a subject that interests you, how you get that, not that you nerd out, but you get that intensity. And it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about that topic or, because you're thinking leprosy, right? Most people go, you gross. But the minute you talked like that, I was like, oh yeah, this would be a really good topic of conversation. Then I'm thinking, yeah, unless you're in that zone of really being curious about things and really wanting to know how things work,
Hmm.
which for people listening to this podcast, you should be in that zone because that's what's going to help you in the long run when you go through an awakening. But yeah, my first thing wasn't you, it's gross. It's oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing I would like to mention, and I
Mm,
don't think this will freak anybody out,
yeah.
is a particular patient who came in, and this is years ago in a different
Mm,
country, so I think I can say it without breaking any, confidences. But young 20-year-old Nigerian law
mm,
student, came from a very well-to-do family, very handsome guy,
mm,
very smart, got everything going for
mm,
him, money, looks,
yeah,
all the things, fiance. And he came in with one of those symptoms I've just described.
right.
And when he was given his diagnosis, the work really began,
Mm,
because it is a bacteria, it's a bacillary transmission. So his fiance needed to be tested.
right,
And then he's at a law school. So who do you tell? Who do you not tell? These are
right,
questions that start to come up. Then he had to let his family back home know. And their response, of course, was to say, that's a poor person's disease. We're cutting you off. You're shaming the
right.
family. So his life went from all things amazing
Mm-hmm.
to the biggest black pit. And that's not a reference to him being Nigerian, it's
Right,
just a
right.
black
Yeah,
hole. It's the biggest pit that it could possibly go into. And so the work then was to get a team around him to help him handle all of those things. And that is a key part of work with somebody with this kind of condition, because he's going to change.
right,
Whenever the immune system tries to upgrade, that's when, every now and then the immune system says, whoa, hey, there's a thing going on here, let's deal
mm,
with it. And that's a time where you have to sit on the immune system, because nerve damage happens at that point. That's where the cartilage in the nose
oh
collapses
yeah,
and the fingers contract
mm-hmm.
and all kinds of things happen. And remember, this was a very good looking guy.
Right,
So he has that to lose as well. And as he learns about it, he learns that this will come at some point. And it's sort of, it's almost luck of the draw as to how long you can hold that off for, because the
right.
medication cocktail that you work up lasts for a while until the immune system does something different, and then you
Yeah,
have to change it. So there's so much involved in that case, so much more than the ew ick, things are going
Yeah.
to drop off. And I did once have somebody's finger come off in my hand, but that's
Hmm.
a whole other story.
Yeah.
No, there was no blood, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I would assume when things rot off, it's because everything is already broken off or severed at that point.
it was done. Yeah,
Yeah. Circulation,
it's
all that. So it's not getting fed. So it's,
its time was done, but it
yeah.
was still quite a thing for a young nurse to wrap her frontal lobes around.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a lot.
Still an event for sure.
It was an event. Yes, as you can tell, I haven't forgotten it.
No.
But
And I don't imagine you would.
right, but so many lessons to learn from somebody with leprosy because they experience all the loss, all the change, and definitely a shift in awareness.
Hmm.
However, it works for that person every single time. You can't not like it. Just it's life altering in every
Oh,
way, every way.
hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. That's definitely life altering. But you're right.
Uh-huh.
We could do a whole episode. In fact, my brain is like, should we do an episode on this? This sounds awesome.
Well, totally could. I have lots to say on the subject because, like I said, I focused on it. It was so interesting to me, and it felt important.
Hmm.
It felt like it was something somebody needed to be paying attention here because there was so much going on. Um, yeah, and the potential for life to go well
Hmm.
despite all of those things, or really not.
You know what? So the way you worded that, the crowd behind me is like, yes, that's what we want to hit on. They want to hit on I guess, this idea of once you become awake or once you start waking up, what do you want to do with it?
That's hugely important.
Yeah.
Yes, so much of that depends on your lens
Hmm.
and what you think you can do with it.
Right. Yeah. This is interesting. Yeah. They're like, just like with, when the other dragon was running the show, it's the hand gesture of, okay, let's go. Yeah, let's go. This is good. Let's go. Let's go. As an
Okay,
aside, it's fun to do it this way to
so
share what they're doing.
what are your thoughts on that? On what do you do with your awakening? Like, what are your options? How did you navigate that?
Yeah. Well, me, I'll say it like this, and I'll out myself here, but only as much as I'm permitted because I'll get blocked if I go too much. But from basically from a very, like, again, so going with the idea of the pre-life contract, it is
Hmm.
abundantly clear to me that I decided to teach, or more specifically, to help people develop who they are and be the best version of themselves. This, when I go back to my furthest memories, I always had in my head of studying people, seeing, and then trying to bring it out in them. I even, like, when I was a little kid, this is weird. So I think the first time I read the X-Men comic books, if you're all familiar with the story of the X-Men, right? If not, right, it's a bunch of, at the time, teenagers born with unusual abilities, and there was I'm not going to get to the whole details of how old he's supposed to be, but because he looked old. But anyways, he starts a school to teach these kids, and something that sat in my head for a long time was to open up a school for people who are psychic, since I
Oh,
was fairly young. So, like, I mean, but I went through a lot of, I'm glad for this question, actually. I went through a lot of notions of what does that mean about me? Like, what am I? So I went for a period of time where, well, I must be a healer because because when you're helping people be the best who they are, you heal a lot of things. People have to go through a lot of healing process. So at first I'm like,
uh,
okay, well, I'm a healer.
yeah, that's a requirement.
Yeah. And then I thought about some of the things I do and some of the ways I look at things. And I thought, well, maybe I'm not completely a healer, you know? Like when I hear people say they're healers, there's usually certain instincts that kick in that don't kick in with me. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding what a healer is. Like I have the ability to draw the line of there's things you need to work on. But that's why I'm saying it that way, because it's like if I'm misunderstanding what a healer is, like your normal instinct would be to repair everything. Whereas my instinct is not to repair everything. My instinct is to show people who they are And then it just happens to work out that a lot of healing happens.
So you're healing differently,
Yeah. That's
but
why
still
I worded
healing.
it a certain way because it's like,
Yeah, and no, I'm listening carefully to what you're saying, and that's still healing.
yeah,
It's just healing within your boundaries,
right.
which is something people would do well to do,
Hmm. Because
honestly.
healing is part of it, right? Part of
It's
helping
it's
people
a
be who they
part of
are is
it.
repairing the pieces of them. So that's why I questioned whether I was a healer or not, because I am doing some healing for people. But I'm also well understanding of some people have to live in their pains. So
Or perhaps you're not the person to
to
heal that
heal it, yeah.
aspect of them, which is fine also, because
Hmm.
there's so many, I like to view people as diamonds, right? You're a cut diamond. There are so many facets,
Yes,
and one other person doesn't get to come along and shine all those facets. You can't fix all the things
right.
because you don't fit all of that.
Well,
No
and that's
one person does, I would say. That's why we have social interaction and
right.
lots of different people in our lives
That's
because they're all
exactly.
there for a different reason.
Hmm. So like I knew mine, even I looked at the way I went through life, all my things were I did things in a fundamental sense of understanding the basics how everything works. Like I like to say I'm not a very complex human being, but one could argue differently about that case. But like my actions, my learning physical skills were not basic, you know, but a good solid fundamentals was always my priority. And it's what I teach when I teach people when there's spiritual awakenings is the foundations, the fundamentals. And that's always been a facet of who I am and how I do things. So for me, I would argue I had already decided early on. So basically almost born to it, as some might say, a calling. And not to say I never deviated because you have to deviate from the things you think you're meant to do so that you can see what they are from another perspective. But it's not that I didn't go through other phases, but I just recognized that, for lack of a better way of putting it, that thread that ran through my whole life.
Mm, I like that too, actually. That's some great clarity.
Mm.
Very cool.
But like I said, right, that's if you believe in the contract, the pre-life contract, or deciding your life before, then it was a very clear, very obvious message that this is what I was going to do, even from a young age. So I
I
don't know if
do
I could say
actually.
yeah,
I do
I don't know if I could
firmly
say I decided or not, but there was
I,
a
I do
decision made.
firmly, I do firmly go with that you already made a plan for what you needed to learn and what you were coming for. There is always a point. Otherwise, there is no point, obviously,
Right.
right? So if you think there's a point to being here, then what do you think that point is? And
Right.
if you follow this line of exploration,
Mhm.
I think many people will arrive at the conclusion that you came for a purpose, a reason, and it's not one thing, honestly. It's a bunch of things that you plan to learn because that's part of what you need to take back with
Mhm.
you. And so sometimes people will agree, like, hey, all right, I will come and help you with that lesson. And it might not be a nice role, it might not be warm and fuzzy. They might be coming to do something downright horrible, but you agreed this in order to
Right.
get this lesson. And that's a perspective that may have just blown a few
Mhm.
minds, but it's something that took me some years to get to because you work through a lot of stuff while you're doing this. But it's always a journey, right? And to me, that one makes sense.
Mm. Well, it's interesting because I had a discussion this weekend with my nephew, and he was talking about not liking the idea of predetermined things. And like I told him, I said, like, whether you wear a blue shirt or a red shirt one day doesn't matter. Think of it more as a script for a play.
Well, it's a general direction, right? If
Yeah.
you've come to learn, like, okay, let's switch to
Mhm.
behavior for a moment, as I often do, because I've been looking at behavior since I was about two,
Right.
and I've mentioned that before.
Hmm.
But you will find that in your relationships, in your life generally, jobs, pick an area, something may well be on a loop where it just keeps happening. It's like deja vu all over again, man.
Hmm.
It's doing it again. I have the same relationship different person. It's like, why does this keep happening? Okay, if you find yourself asking,
Mm,
why does this keep happening? That is your big clue. That's like the massive checker flags of any
hmm.
race car thing that, okay, you have arrived at a pivotal point. This is where you need to get the lesson you came for
Right.
in this particular thing. What is it? I don't know. That's your job to find out.
That's
But
right.
you are there. You are at that place where the lesson sits.
Hmm.
And until you learn it, that loop keeps happening. And that's why so many people have this sort of seemingly endless loop of misfortune or awful relationships or jobs that suck or what, pick a thing. But wherever that loop is, that's your lesson. That's what you came to get. It's not the only thing, but it's one of the things. And you have to do the work. You have to find out what that is.
Yeah, it's funny. Also, to add to my answer, I had my trickster teacher, I think about 3 years old when I started. So safe to say that I was on the path I needed to be on, and you know, so. But I'm trying to think if that is a perfectly honest answer, because my memories go back to about 2 years old,
Mhm.
three better than two, but I don't remember starting to interact until I'd say about five. So I don't know if the first 2 years there was interaction or if I was just being guided and didn't recognize. I'm trying to think if that's how honest of a statement it is to say I had my trickster teacher since I was three.
Well, it feels right to you right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. I just wonder about it. Well, because like your spirits will be working with you before you're aware that you're working with them.
Right,
So if I remember my interaction starting at 5 years old, then it started before I was five.
right.
Three is almost was almost an arbitrary number for me to say three, but just suffice to say that pretty much early on it was a thing.
Hmm.
But your question is good because when you're awakening, it's a good chance to explore what your contract is if you remember if you can think about what it is. Like I always tell people, right? I mean, we've discussed this, I'm pretty sure, in the first episode you were on. I always say, like, if you want to know who you are, think about what your priorities have been through your whole life and what's been consistent. And I always say I always have a sketchbook.
Right.
So it's not to say that I have a sketchbook because I want to be a great artist, but what I've noticed is drawing is how I did a lot of my deep thinking.
Hmm. That's how you process, and it's
Right,
it's where your inspiration comes in.
right.
That makes
So
absolute sense.
yeah. So, and I worded that ex and I used that example specifically because I want people listening to this, if they're going to look through this, and I'll say it right now, this is going to be the assignment because it's going to be look and see what your priorities, the priorities that have followed you through your life. But the one thing I had to figure out was because I thought it meant, well, be a professional artist, but I did some art professionally, but I never became a professional artist. And I always wondered with them, why did I always have a sketchbook with me and why was I always constantly drawing? But it dawned on me, this is how I viewed the world, how I processed information. It was visually.
Right.
So it
See, my
made,
way is to write everything down,
yeah.
handwritten, not on a computer, and I don't need to reread it.
Mhm.
That's the funny part, is I write reams and reams of paper, but I don't reread it typically. And it's the act of writing that works for me. And stream of consciousness writing is awesome because I don't know what's going to come out next. It's so much fun. And
Yeah.
then doing something like a podcast like this with you, where I have no idea where we're going. I don't know what's going to come up, and I have no idea what I'm going to say. But it'll come, and it does. It always does.
Mm.
And I did, somebody asked me on the weekend, would you come and do a talk for us on Monday, a presentation? And I was in the middle of Denver Fan Expo at the
Right.
time. And there's cosplay, there's like thousands of people
Mm.
there, there's all sorts going on. And I just sort of texted back, sure, sure, I'll do it. I didn't have a topic, let alone anything
Right.
else. And I ended up doing, I showed up, I did the talk, and it was a subject I've not done a talk on before. But
Yeah.
I just and as I sometimes like to do, it's a little bit mischievous, but just before we went live, she was about to hit live.
Mhm.
She said something like, "I'm really looking forward to hearing your talk today." And I said, "Me too. I have no idea how this is going to go."
Yeah.
And she's like, "What?"
Yeah.
And then hit record. But that's me in flow. That's how it works for
Yeah.
me. Writing that way, or just I start to talk on a topic and it goes where it goes. So far, it's worked well.
Well, it's good because I mean it's working for this podcast. I will say,
Yay.
yeah. It's funny because when I think about it, this is just a not a scientific aside, but an aside. Like what I find because I'm basically half in channeling mode because I'm paying attention to Bruce's show.
I see
Sometimes I
that.
don't remember what we've spoken about and I have to re-listen to the episode so I can be clear on what it was the topic was.
Oh, I'm always like that.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, somebody will sometimes say to me, "Can you repeat that?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, you're going to have to get the recording because I don't actually know what I just said." So, but whatever it was, I'm sure it will still be there when you get there.
Yeah. It's funny because I'll get asked from time to time to write a book. People tell me, "Oh, you say like really wise things. You should write it down." I'm like, listen, I don't record myself and I have no idea what I said. So same way. It's like, I don't know what I just said. If it was brilliant, great. It came on the
Right.
spur of a moment.
Yeah,
It's like,
it's that's the creative flow. That is you from a human design perspective, that's exactly how you operate. When you're
mm,
in flow and things happen and you don't necessarily remember, and it certainly wasn't planned,
right.
that that's you in flow. That is your correct channel for who you are as an energetic being. And
Yeah.
and it's beautiful. It's like floating down the river as
Yeah.
opposed to making like a salmon and fighting your way upstream. The floating down the river
Mhm.
is when you're doing exactly what you're made to do. And doing the battle upstream is typically what you're doing when you're doing what you think other people want you to do.
Mm,
And
yes.
that's a pretty clear distinction if ever a person's considering that when they're listening to this, well, how do I know it's me? Well, is it working for you or is it hard to do? If
Yeah.
if it's a struggle and it's frustrating, then it's probably not you, it's somebody else's
Mm.
idea.
Yeah. I'd almost say, not because I want to use the word struggle, but I mean, it can be surprisingly easy, like scarily surprisingly easy sometimes when you're in flow. Like everything, like almost like, you were saying the one time in your dream, like you just step on the next thing to the next thing to the next thing.
Mhm.
And it's like, it's, or it's like that. I think they used to do it on Looney Tunes a lot on Bugs Bunny, that kind of thing, where the person's blindfolded, they just walk on to the next thing.
Yes, Mr.
Everything just happens
Magoo
to get into
does.
place.
Mr.
Yeah.
Magoo does this whole thing.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah,
that
Mr.
that
Magoo's an example.
actually is exactly it.
Yeah.
That is you in flow
Yeah.
when you don't know how. And that's actually a key part. So if anybody's making notes, underline, don't know how. You don't know how, you don't know what's next, but you're going there.
Hmm.
And it will arrive as you get to that point. So it's a bit like you take a step and the stair arrives under your foot. You
Yeah.
take
You
the
said that
step and the
before. I was
next
gonna say,
stair
yeah, like you
arrives.
said.
That's exactly how flow works.
Mm,
And you're focused on moving forward toward where you're
mm,
going and not the how or the what. It's
right.
like you're just gonna do the thing and it will arrive. It will work that way. Because when you have expectations about what you're going to do with this, so to keep it on topic, if you have expectations about how you're going to use your awareness, you could get bogged down for quite a while in a sort of starting block
Right.
that's in mud because you've become unclear on how to proceed forward. And the how to is to not worry about the how to.
Yeah.
As soon as you let go of that, and we're schooled out of that quite early
Mm,
on. People always want to know well, how does this work? How do I do that? And how? But sometimes you just got to do
yep.
and not worry
That's
about the how.
yeah. That's the interesting thing of being in the line of work we are. It's not that we're ignorant of things and it's not that we don't know how things work, but it's even if you know all those things, sometimes it's just time to do what you need to do.
I love to know how things work. I mean, I'm a behavior analyst. I'm always looking at people's
Well, that's what I
behavior.
mean.
But to move forward,
Mhm.
you don't need to know how. Like there's a time and a place for how. And if it's halting your progress because you're stuck not knowing,
Mhm.
that's a very clear sign
Right, to
that
just do.
you just need to take that trust fall. You just need to go do the thing. If knowing how is an obstacle, there's your clue.
Yeah. And it's this is a fun moment. I guess we know what our topic of no, I'm not gonna word it right. So we have our topic anyways for the call. The topic is how to move forward with your once you're awakened. And but it is interesting because we live in that dichotomy of knowing how things work, the whole wisdom part of it, knowing how things work, but then also having to let go of everything you know and just let
Yeah,
it go.
and I think part of that is realizing that you know an aspect of how things work. You don't know all the aspects
Right.
of how things work, and it's not a requirement in order to progress. And I'm not sort of saying faith the way you would use it in a
Right.
religious term. That's a whole other ball game and
Mm.
definitely another podcast episode. If you want to actually broadcast that one, I'll go there.
Yeah.
But it's more the faith in the universe,
Mm.
your energy, and the fact that you are joined, that you're part
Right.
of that
Hmm.
whole. And so there's no reason for it not to work.
Right.
Of course, it's going to work.
Yeah.
You just have to get out of your own way.
Hmm.
And getting out of your own way is to let go of all the mental reasoning of the how and what's it going to look like. And in particular, the Buddhists have been saying this
Mm.
for centuries, let go of the attachment to the
Mm.
outcome. Because if you're focused on it must be this way, then you may have the wrong notion of where it's going to end up, and nothing will get you there.
That's
And
right.
that's why there's so many people spinning their wheels and stuck in a place of, I can't move forward. Well, you have to let go of what you think that's going to look like,
Mm.
and then you'll find your path is a lot easier.
Yeah, it's funny, in saying about the idea of faith, like, because I had said my nephew, right, doesn't like the idea of predetermined things. But when we explored it further, the reason he doesn't like it is because he doesn't like the religious idea of it, like, because this leads to fights, it leads to wars because my group is superior to your group and we're predestined for this. And he says, and I told him, I said, well, but that's not really how it works. That's not the point of it. The point is not to give dominance to one group over another group or have to kill your enemies. The predetermined is how you're going through life and what you need to learn. It's so don't worry about the grandiose things that you more see in adventure books and movies and just go to this is your life and your life has a certain degree of guidance in it.
It's a bit like you are the main character
Hmm.
in your own movie, and
Right,
everybody else plays a role, right? But your character has a direction they're moving in. They
right.
have a point to being in the movie. And so, if you will, that's predetermined.
Mhm.
But they might ad lib, they
Right,
might make it look different. Two actors are going to take the same role and do it differently. So it doesn't mean that your every move is preordained
right.
or, your breakfast has
Mm.
been determined since before you were born. That's getting a little bogged down
Yeah.
in unnecessary detail, right? And it's that kind of approach does go more toward a religious one where, if it's good, it's God's work, and if
Hmm.
it's bad, well, I don't know. It depends on your religion as to where
Yeah.
you attribute it. But as a thing that leaps to mind right now is I was living in Asia when
Hmm.
the tsunami hit in Thailand
Right.
in 2004,
Hmm.
and it was Christmas Eve. And I was in Asia, not terribly far from there. We had some waves, but we did
Yeah.
not have the tsunami. But I do remember being absolutely irate at people who were affected by it.
Hmm.
and they said, God saved me, or the angels came and
Hmm.
saved me. And I was so angry with those people for their stance because several thousand people lost their lives there.
Hmm.
So was God not looking after them? Was God not saving them? The angels didn't care, like the inference of that rather arrogant view, in my opinion,
Yeah.
was, God's got an eye on you, screw everybody else. And
Well,
it's
that's what I
just
mean. Yeah.
that has never sat well with me, and I don't care what your religion is.
Mm.
If it follows that approach, then I have an issue with it
Mm.
because that is a rather mm, arbitrary way of dealing with things. And really, if this being is able to create the planet, the
Mm.
universe, all the things, would they really be that petty as to say, I think I'll save that one, but not that
Mm.
one? Like really?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was something I went off on more than one person for their sanctimonious sort of I
Yeah.
was saved because God loves me kind of thing.
Yeah. It's funny. I like to call it the Santa Claus paradox.
Okay.
You have a story that started with was he an archbishop or bishop, anyways, who gave gifts to a poor family, but yet in the modern context, if you're poor, you don't get as many gifts on Christmas as someone who's wealthy. So does that automatically equate poor kids are bad and rich kids are good? You get that weird story that
Yeah, there's a lot with that particular story, and then you have the beings who accompanied St. Nicholas who beat children who were naughty and that kind of
yes.
thing. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on there that again is
Yeah.
it's actually a tool for parents at the time to use to control their kids. Like if you look at the fairy stories from Hans Christian Andersen,
Mm-hmm.
the Brothers Grimm, who was Grimm, it's all about kids going out into the forest and getting eaten, or monsters running off with them. This was basically stories that parents would tell their kids so that while the parents were out in the fields all day, kids were too terrified to go out of the house and they wouldn't get lost. Right? So it
Mm-hmm.
was like babysitting, if you will, for those days. Scare the pants off your kids and they're not going to go anywhere. And that's how that worked. So those stories have kind of developed and morphed into all kinds of weird things that we
Yeah.
do these days. And Santa's a great example. And he's only large and wearing this red outfit because of Coca-Cola.
Well, that's what I
So
was going to say. It's weird to look back on the history of Santa Claus and seeing just how much, like, for maybe the last century, that his whole image had changed.
yeah, and
Like,
and people don't realize that that's actually a marketing thing. It's a
yeah,
Coca-Cola thing. It's like, yeah, Santa.
yeah, it's funny. Actually, I used to write stories for members of my family, like, because they couldn't afford to buy a gift, so I'd write stories or I'd make up characters about them in the Christmas
Oh,
in
that's
birthday and
fun.
Christmas cards. And the last story I was working on, I was thinking, and I was going to call it the Christmas Five. So because there's like a bunch of like you have Santa Claus, but there's also La Bufana in Italy. You have I don't know if it's in the Netherlands. It's after New Year's, and then it's a king and his princess daughter who bring it. And then when you look in the more Norse countries, there's an actual where the whole idea of Santa Claus and his reindeer come from. But it's like Santa Claus, well, the guy, but he turns into a monster if the kids are bad. But
Right.
he's the one, he lives in a mountain in a cold region. He has gnomes instead of elves, and his sleigh is pulled by goats instead of deer. So I had
Mm.
like those characters, and then they get kidnapped. So Christmas isn't coming. So it's up to, the Krampus, Black Pete, in French, le Père Fouettard, the guy who follows the Père Noël. Like it's up to those guys to go rescue them because Christmas can't happen. So they have to band together to. I
Oh,
never
that's
ended up writing
fun.
it, but I did work on a bunch of the characters.
That's fun. Well,
Yeah.
maybe you're yet to write it.
Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, the legends that start off as meaning one thing because you mean them as well-intentioned stories to help kids learn things and that, but then something like Santa Claus, right? Poor kids don't get visited or they don't get many gifts if they get any at all. And then the wealthy kids
Right.
get a lot of gifts because, they're unless they've got parents who are like really strict on to be your own whatever. But you know what I mean? Generally speaking, on average, right? The healthier you are, the more gifts you get and the less wealthy you are.
Sure.
So it kind of throws off the whole idea of this is a guy who loves kids equally and gives them all gifts.
Right. And while we're on that subject,
Yeah.
something just came to mind about witchcraft, right?
Okay.
So many people are afraid of witchcraft or they think it's evil.
Right.
And I've heard people say quite literally, if you deal with crystals, that's devil magic. And it's like, are you serious? These are rocks that have energy, but they're
Right.
rocks. They're the most natural thing. So how that would be of the devil, I'm not quite sure. But
Yeah.
think of witchcraft and then some of the things we do with our kids, like the tooth fairy.
Right.
Okay, so this being of another realm is going to come at night and take, the bone of your
Mm-hmm.
child, the discarded pieces of your child, and leave you money for it. If that's not getting into the fey, I don't know
Right.
what is, right? It's totally a thing. And there are so many rituals that we have that are absolutely, you could tie them to witchcraft. If you go into a Catholic church and start
Mm-hmm.
lighting candles, talk to me about the candles, right?
Yeah.
The incense that's waved around everywhere. What's the incense doing? There's a lot of this that actually, if you look at it, and then you compare it to what's happening in witchcraft, they are the same. That the one came from the other, and I know which one's been around the longest, and
Right.
it's not the church. So, it's so interesting though that we incorporate some of these things and call it good,
Mm.
and then something as innocuous as a crystal can be labeled as devil magic. And
Right.
I know someone whose sister and she
Mhm.
broke apart, like they don't talk to each other anymore because the sister accused her of being in league with the devil because she had
Uh,
crystals.
yeah,
And to blow up a family relationship in that way
mhm.
blows my mind. But that is sort of where some people are at in their journey, and so far from any kind of awareness that they instead retreat into a fear base. So that's to bring that topic in as well. If you're afraid of something you don't fully understand yet and you have no interest in learning about it, then your only recourse is to retreat into fear.
Right.
It's either forwards or backwards. You don't stay still.
Yeah. And it's an interesting issue because this is like, so I was raised Catholic. I ended up stopping when I decided to seriously go into it and be like, okay, I did my confirmation. I'm going to take this really seriously. Bang. Okay, I quit. Like 6 months later, I'm out of here. But so then I started looking into history and stuff, and you start to realize the reason Christianity has the popularity it has today is part of it is because Catholicism just basically stole every pagan ritual it could get its hands on to
Huh?
keep followers. So you start to see like pretty much, but and this kind of before I forget about this detail, like it baffles me, right? Like so the three wise men, which isn't in all of the gospels, but I always like I hear people say, "Oh, astrology is evil." It's like, how do you think they found Jesus? That's literally astrology. Like,
Right.
but like people break it down to, and I mean, far be it for me to say to it because like I said my whole practice is just me sitting there listening to spirits talk. But so a lot of people gloss over by saying, "Well, no, the Holy Spirit told them." I'm like, no. I says went to a Catholic school, and even then, I knew it was astrology by the way they described it. So it's
Yeah.
like, no, that's not what happened. They looked at the stars. That's how they found it. Because if you could read the stars, that's how people knew you were wise. If you could read the stars, if you could do crystals, if you could do magic, that was all, even in the Bible, considered wise to know those things. What kind of magic you practice made a difference, but
Right.
those
And the thing
ideas were
is,
not lost. Like,
what kind of magic you practice surely must depend on what the situation is.
yes.
So, I come across people who say, "Oh, I only do white witchcraft," and okay. So that's a bit Pollyanna-ish, right?
Yeah.
It's like everything's wonderful and I'm only going to do good things. Occasionally, you might need to do something that's a shade of gray.
Yeah.
because it might be important to do that. For example, if somebody's trying to cause you harm
Hmm.
or they're trying to curse you or something, you might want to do a return to sender or a
Hmm.
freezer spell or something like that to prevent what they're doing. Now, is that white witchcraft? I'm going to say it's a little more gray. It's not exactly
Yeah.
the warm and fuzzy, let's all dance with the fairies stuff. Although, actually, if you do dance with the fairies, be very careful about that. There's a whole thing there. But,
Yeah.
it's I think life has all the colors, and so does
Mhm.
witchcraft. And it's
Yeah.
appropriate at different times.
And that's the thing, right? Like we get so into the idea of one thing is good, one thing is bad. Like when I
Mhm.
started my elemental practice to like, because I divide basically spiritual energy into two polarities, knowing and doing. And so, and I always tell people, pick a color that you can focus on, one for knowing and one for doing. So I started off black and white. Doesn't
Okay.
get any easier than that, right? So I used black for doing because if you act without knowing, you're in the dark, right? So
Okay.
black, perfect color, although shade, whatever. We want to get technical about colors, but so when people would ask me what I'm doing and I talk about that, they're like, "Oh, you're engaging in evil." I'm like, "No." I says it's arbitrary color I picked to do a thing. But the thing is, like if you break it down, spiritual forces that way. So the downside to using just action is it's hard on your body.
Right.
It gives you stress. But the downside of knowing, which the good thing, we're passive, we don't attack, is that you become slovenly. Your body breaks down basically because it's not doing anything to keep itself going. You need that combination of both energies, but neither of the energies are bad or good. You know,
Right.
at worst, it's what you're attracted to the most. Like if you're someone who likes physical activity, then the whole fact that the knowing can actually make you slovenly and lazy and too complicit if you use it too often. Not complicit. Uh,
Passive?
yes, because if you want to best understand information, usually you have to relax, take everything in, have your body, in a non-agitated form is the easiest way to take in information. It's not the only way, but it's the easiest way. So it has all these features that are conducive to acquiring knowledge.
Hmm.
And then the other one is activity, but you can't act without, like, it's hard to take an action without knowing where you are in space so as to be able to guide your movement. So I always tell people, just be a gray master, like,
Well,
because you
it's
can't do one
balance.
without the other.
You need balance, or if
Yeah.
you don't like the idea of balance, harmony.
Yes.
It's not all one way or all the other way. And I would argue that different occasions call for different things.
Right.
The question is your motivation. The question is your intention.
Yes.
And whatever you use to get to that place is the vehicle. It's not bad or
Right.
good. It's what you're doing with it that
Hmm.
matters, and why you're doing that thing. That's what matters. So, when people get hung up on witchcraft is bad,
Right.
or there's in Wicca, which is another religion, right?
Right.
There's this threefold rule of do no harm, things come back tenfold, yada yada.
Right.
It's actually a spin on the Christian religions.
Hmm.
It's it's a sort of sanitized version, if you will. I would say Wicca isn't necessarily witchcraft.
Right.
It to a degree, but it's a very controlled, religiously controlled thing. Whereas witchcraft itself is your relationship with nature and how you work with it, how it works with you. And that's a very different thing,
Hmm.
right? And there is no religion there. There's no sort of, well, these are the rules, da da da. You figure it out based on your relationship with the things that you work with. And you'll soon find out if you're going the wrong way, the way that doesn't work, or the way that's not healthy for you. You'll soon figure it out. You don't need a rule book for that.
Mm.
Rule
That's
books
the,
are typically made by people to control other people.
yeah. It's an important thing for everyone to remember. It's about your relationship with the things you work with. That is
Yes.
absolutely important.
Hmm.
because you had already said, right, the easiest way to describe it as the spirits are as complex, at least as complex as human beings are complex.
Sure.
So it's the same thing. You can interact with a human being and they're perfectly lovely to you all the time and they do great things and they support you, but they're a complete monster to someone else.
Right.
So it's like it's the same thing when you deal with spirits. Like that's why I like one, I don't usually say the names of the spirits I work with because one, they don't give me a name in the first place. So, and I don't ask for it because I know who they are when they present themselves because I know my relationship to them. So I don't usually give names for anything when people ask. I'm not working with anything that have names that people recognize anyways. So
Right.
that doesn't matter. But I usually don't recommend doing that, telling people that anyways, just because people have their preconceived notions once they hear a name.
Right. Like if I said to you Persephone,
Right. Queen of the underworld.
right, but she's also the goddess of spring,
Yeah.
vegetation, and agriculture.
Hmm.
So you have the above world,
Yeah.
really necessary, and the queen of the underworld,
Hmm.
daughter of Zeus and Demeter. There's a whole lot of story there, but people will typically have one thing they think of. And in Persephone's case, oh, you know, Persephone and Hades,
Yeah.
bad. But it's not that clear cut. And I would say that fits life in general. It's not that clear cut. And being mindful of your intentions when you're stepping into something and your motivation for it. And that can actually be a tricky part for people because as human beings, we can reason our way in and out of trouble all day, right?
Right.
Might not be reasonable, but we can certainly reason
He's in. Yes.
and we can come up with plausible stories to tell ourselves that we can buy and then go ahead and do that thing. So it's really important. Your fundamentals, for example, are key here
Hmm.
because you have to be very clear on, is that really my intention? Is that really my motivation? Or am I telling myself a story here? And spending a little time to discover that before you do something that could have ramifications for yourself and other people, it's important. So getting the fundamentals right, stopping and taking a little time there is really important in order to navigate the way you'd like to further down the line.
Mm.
If you move from muddy or unclear motivations, then that's the kind of result you'll get,
Yeah.
muddy and unclear.
It's funny. At some point I'm going to offer these up as videos because I mean, there is a video, like I do have the videos of all our recorded conversation.
Mhm.
But it's funny because I think if the audience could see what we do behind the scenes, our faces, how we're thinking about things, and because I've been sitting here while you're talking, absorbing it, listening to your words without looking at you so I can purely hear what you're saying.
Uh-huh.
So it's funny, but it'd be interesting. But that's not yet, anyways. Especially not with this shirt on. People can't see this at home, but depending on how I move, because I'm using a virtual background, the shoulder parts of my shirt is black and it disappears every once in a while.
Yeah, no, I keep thinking Star Trek, but
Yeah, yeah, the next generation uniforms.
uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, it does kind of look like that when you don't see the whole shirt.
Yep.
But yeah, now that I've ruined the train of thought for myself. But yeah, it's
We
very
were going on
important.
intentions and
Yeah,
motivation and
it's
clarity.
incredibly important to be clear. Because
Yes.
even going back to the idea that spirits are just like people, it's true. Like, like I said, I had a trickster teacher who had a very good example of what it's like of a spirit doing something good for you, but it's not necessarily on its own best intention. So there were moments if I wasn't clear on what I was doing, it's like, oh, I guess I have to bring you back to the thought. Then I have no particular guidance on how to do that, so I'm going to do what I want to bring you back to what I need you to be. So, as I like to say, and I've said this in this episode, right? Sometimes my lessons were humiliation and pain. So,
And the rocky places are where we
mm,
get the greatest learning if
right.
if we can be open to it. And that goes straight back to the behavior loops I was talking about
Hmm.
before. If things keep getting hard, if things are tough all the time,
Mm.
that's a message right there
Yeah.
that there's a lesson you need to learn.
Mm.
And it's time to sort of take a minute
Mm.
to stop and really look at, okay, what is it that keeps happening? And a key part, if you're wondering about how to do this, a key part is take your ego out of it.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. It's not important about you in the picture. It's more, if you can be more objective and just look at it as you would for somebody else,
Hmm.
you'll get clearer answers. When the ego is involved, and this isn't a judgment thing, this is just straight up, this is what I observed
Yeah.
too. When the ego is in there, you have all kinds of stories that stop the clarity from coming in. They act like barriers. So you can't get the truth because your ego barriers are kind of
Hmm.
protecting you from something that might be uncomfortable or difficult or even simply not what you thought. And those are exactly the places you need to go. Those are exactly what you got to get into.
Yeah. It's funny. I'd almost say so your ego puts up a filter, and if you're already filtering out the
Mhm.
answer because you don't like what the answer leads, you can't get to the truth of what you need because you're already filtered out for that answer.
Well, look at politics and you see it
Yeah.
right there. People are filtering all the time, confirmation bias. They only want what agrees with them. And I find very often that there isn't really a good basis for the stance. It's just the one they've decided is theirs, and they'll fight for it,
Mm.
even though they don't really know exactly why. And that is an unexamined ego contribution that's going to get in the way of any kind of progress. And if it means something about you in order to acknowledge that you made a mistake or you've now learned more than you knew before and you've changed your mind, so few people actually do that. And yet it's not damaging to who you are in any way, shape, or form. It's part of how you grow. Think of a snake shedding its skin. If it doesn't shed its skin, it dies. It has to shed its skin in order to be able to grow and to
Right.
continue on its path. So if you can't shed your old ego and your old notions of things when faced with new information, then on some level you're going to die.
Yeah.
Might not be physically, but your engagement, your ability to grow and progress is going to be halted. And that's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. It's I almost don't want to interfere with your train of thought, but there's something apparently that needs to be said. And I don't know why, but I'm thinking I was almost thinking instead of saying a snake shedding its skin, think of a crustacean, pretty much any kind of crustacean. If they don't shed their shells, they're like we're talking hard, right? They're
Mhm.
stuck, they're crushed in their shell. I don't know why that's an example to bring up. Now I'm trying to think.
Except the hermit crabs who
Yeah.
do actually move from shell to shell.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that is yeah.
And they move on to the next size when they need the next size.
Yeah.
And people need to be able to do that too.
Because you know
With
what?
the
That's the example they were looking for was the hermit crab actually.
Okay.
I don't know why that mattered to them, but it mattered.
It's cool. I mean, you can envisage a hermit crab, I think, and the kind of shell it has. And
Mhm.
sometimes we see on social media, you'll see a hermit crab that's got like a plastic cup as a
Mhm.
shell, for example, because that's what it picked up, the trash in the ocean.
Yes. And I think that's what they're looking for. Not the hermit crabs, the quote unquote producers of the show.
Aha. Well, I'm glad that came up then. But being able to do that
Hmm.
is something that we're not taught as kids, we're kind of untaught. This is the way. You have to listen to your teacher. This is it. Don't argue. And that is the most stifling way to raise a
Mm.
child ever. And it happens all the time in schools. And it's just you then have to spend the rest of your life trying to overcome that. I'm trying to be the person who will ask the questions and who
Yeah.
will shed their shell and pick up a cup. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes you got to do that.
Yeah. You know what? I think we should sit for a second with the idea of kids here and learning because it's true, right? Like I already had made the joke about when my sister had asked me to tell her kids to behave, act their age, and I was like, well, they're being obstinate, they're not listening to you, they're talking
Mhm.
back. Yeah, they're acting their age. They're good. I told them carry on. Like,
Right?
but when you think about small kids, right? And the idea of like, okay, now you have to sit at your seat and you have to listen to this lecture all day. It's like that's totally the opposite of how kids behave
It is
and how they learn.
100% the opposite. In fact, I've done a lot of work on this and I've read the research and I continue to read the research. And a child's brain to properly develop needs around 8 hours a day outside.
Mm,
And they need to explore their environment. I mean, when kids are picking things up, babies are putting everything in their mouth.
right,
They're not doing it because they want to eat it necessarily. They're doing it because that is one of the senses that
yeah,
tells them what this object is. They're learning about it and they're learning about their environment. And to make a child sit still is probably the worst torture we have
mm,
invented for children because they are not built to do that. They're not meant to do that from a learning perspective. And it doesn't help the brain to grow in any way, shape, or form. And then add to that the utter crap that so many kids are fed and called
mhm,
food that they don't even have the raw materials to make their brain from, and then they're made to sit still. I'm astonished people can still walk and talk
right,
because we don't help them to develop or to grow at all. And I have had these conversations in schools all over the place. And as you can imagine, I'm not always the most popular person there.
right,
And I really don't care. I just wish that they would hear me and look at the kids. Now, I used to teach Montessori
right,
way back when my kids were little. I love Montessori because the child is moving. They
mhm,
get up and they go do things. And one of the things little kids love to do is they love to clean tables. They love to do washing up. They
mm,
love to do these tasks that as adults we learn to hate.
right,
But kids love it because it's a repetitive motion and it's got
mm,
all kinds of sensation going on. And you can have a kid clean a table as happy as you like. And then they learn to cut up food. Yes, they learn how to handle knives.
right,
And a child who learns to handle a knife is not going to cut themselves. It's the ones who never get to handle a knife.
mhm.
Those are the ones that cut themselves. So we take all that is good in an early childhood education and we throw it away and make them sit still. And that stifles every aspect of that child.
You know what? I'm going to add to what you say. So, I'll, you know, the anonymity of people will be honored and all that stuff. But there was a kid I made the acquaintance of a long time ago. At 2 years old, he could ride a bike and he could rollerblade.
Cool.
Mostly because his parents basically, we'll say, didn't really watch over him very much. So he learned to do all kinds of things by himself.
Okay.
And I have never been more impressed by a child.
That's very much how Gen X raised themselves
Yeah,
too, is without being watched over.
right.
But a child in the following their natural inclination, which is what you do in Montessori, the sort of catchphrase is follow the child. So you see, what
Mhm,
are they interested to learn? Let me give them more of that. And kids will get their focus and their flow going
mhm,
on all kinds of areas, and they're learning something the whole time without being taught. And I think this is really important for schools to understand. Kids love to learn, but they don't typically like being taught. It's a
right.
very different process. So, if I am investigating something, then I'm learning about it, but I'm not being taught, right? I'm not being talked at. I'm not being corralled in some way that I have to fit this mold. And that is so important. It can take years to overcome this. And I have 4 degrees. And
Mhm,
the point to saying this right now is not, look at me, I'm so smart,
right,
but it's more where I'm going with this,
right.
which is every time I get a certificate or a degree, The people I get that from say to me, okay, so now you have this, forget all of that. And then you go on and you get the next degree, and they say,
Mm.
okay, forget all of that. And at some point, I stopped and said, wait a minute, why is everybody telling me to forget everything I've learned before? Why can't I put it all together?
Mm-hmm.
Why do they have to be separate? And every discipline you look at, especially in science, I have to say, they want to exclude all the other areas and keep you narrow. Now, where did that level of control come from and that level of containment? Because just think what you could do if you took everything that you knew and everything that you learned and used all of it instead of only the latest thing. So this is for whoever is currently on a field of study and they think that they have to forget the rest. I'm here to say, no, that's the story you're sold.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do it. Remember all the things and use them, because that compilation is you. It's what you've learned. It's what you're bringing to the table. And it's really important. If you want to be, to use an overused word, authentically you, if you want to be really showing up as yourself, then you got to bring all the parts.
Right.
And that's
Like,
exactly what we're told not to do.
yeah, because it's funny because one of the thing, like, I don't have kids of my own, but I've spent time helping raising other kids. And one of the things I always tell parents when they don't know what to do is I'm like, when you teach your child something, now that child is using that skill. It's like if you taught your 6-year-old to cook, your kid's in rotation for making supper. That's or lunch or breakfast or something because you gave that kid a skill. That kid right now is so proud of learning to do
Mhm.
something complex. As if you do not now require them to make supper, they're just going to think, why am I learning stuff?
And they would have a very, very good point.
Right.
I mean, for my kids, and they're male, so
Mm-hmm.
this makes a difference, but I taught them both to sew
Mm-hmm.
and to knit and to do the ironing and all the things that they need to do. And my eldest, he actually made a coat by hand,
Oh, nice.
stitched the whole thing, and he wears it. Like it came out well. My youngest knits gifts for people. So when you were talking about writing stories,
Yeah.
he'll sit there in the winter, and he's in Canada, so he's got all
Right.
the snow and stuff going on,
Mm-hmm.
but he'll sit there and knit gifts for people. And if his girlfriend's button comes off, he has to sew it back on because she
Right.
doesn't know how. If her hem needs fixing, he does it because she doesn't know how. He has life skills, and he got to use them because, by crikey, I taught the youngest one to sew because he was so hard on his jeans, ripping out the knees all the time, that by the time he was 8, I said, okay, this is how you fix your jeans. Now you are responsible. And
Mm-hmm.
he wouldn't even come and ask me. I'd see him heading for the sewing drawer, and he'd pull the stuff out and go fix the jeans he'd just ripped. And he was in single digits still. And
Nice.
that was, and that is a lifelong skill. So sure, when a kid learns something, they should be proud of it and also practical with it,
Right.
because that's how that skill sticks. You've just given them an academic exercise otherwise.
Right.
So, yeah, and both of them can cook, they can do the housework, they can do all the things, and they can chop wood, right? So they can do all the things. But these were skills that they got to learn and use. And that was so important.
Actually, yeah, to give an example, one of my nephews, he's a teenager now, but when he was younger, he'd be scared of a lot of things. And he had come to visit my mom, and I was living with my mom at the time. And so she was sick the whole time he was there, and he was always like, "Oh, Uncle Dan, what can I do? What can I do?" And I said, "Okay, listen, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go talk to grandma, ask her how she is." Okay. She was fine. It was just a cold, but it lingered. So I said, like, ask her if she wants a glass of water. Ask her if she wants some tea or some soup or something. I'll show you how to make it. But go ask her if you're worried. And so he would. And then we would, if she wants something, we'd make her something. And then he felt like he could do something if something happened. And
Right.
then his anxiety levels went down because now he knew at least he had something he could do. He wasn't like just in a weird, mysterious place where everything's going on around him and he's powerless.
He's also included, and that is so
Yeah.
important because kids are aware that they are excluded so much of the time. And again, to go to a personal example, we were living in Singapore at this point, and my youngest was at that stage, I think he was about 12, maybe, where he said, I am so fed up of nobody asking my opinion or
Hmm.
wanting me to make a decision. Like, I forget how he phrased it, but that was
Yeah.
basically what he said. And I thought he had a valid point. So, as it happened, my then spouse and eldest were lobbying hard to go to Nepal for a trip.
Hmm.
And we'd already been, I didn't want to do it again. So I said to my youngest, okay, do you want to go to Nepal with them? And he
Yeah.
said no. So I said, great. You get to choose where do we travel to? And I gave him a newspaper with all kinds of trips and stuff,
Right.
and he chose an island in Thailand. So I said, great, go book it. And I showed him how to do it and I left him with it. I literally left the room, left him to
Right.
book it. And he had control of that entire trip for a week. He and I went on it. And
Right.
every day he chose what we did, where we ate, what time we went to bed. Like he controlled all the things. And I watched that human being grow about 4 years in that week
Mm.
because he matured in such a beautiful way. Like without me saying anything, he took that responsibility and said to himself, like, okay, I have to make sure that mom likes this and what are we doing? And he took into consideration what I would like. And he took so many, does this cost more than that? He brought in so many skills that kids of that age typically aren't expected to have.
Hmm.
And I honestly didn't know that he had all of them, but he was pulling those in, and we had a great week. But he grew in self-confidence, self-efficacy, so many ways because I literally let him take the reins.
Right.
And it was a risk on my part. Like, goodness only knows where we would have ended up,
Mm.
could have ended up. But
Right.
he was equal to the challenge. And that is something that we don't do with our kids. And I'm just happy that it came to me to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's always, I'll go the long way around about this. When people babysit and they're young for the first time they babysit, they say, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" I go, "Well, here's the first thing." I says, "First, act like you want to be there." That's the first one. When you're with the child, act like you want to be with the child because a kid will listen to you, but if you act like you don't want to be there, the kid is going to make it your problem because they're going to think you don't want to be here. And then it's true because when you're engaged with the child, one, time goes by faster, a lot faster than if you just sit there and go, okay, oh, I got to do this for 3 hours and you just sit back and, you know, not engage. And the child resents you for it basically because now you're the one there in charge and it doesn't even, the child doesn't even think you care about it and it'll
And
punish you accordingly.
the child is also getting a message
Yeah,
that they're not important, you
right.
don't like them, and the kids' bandwidth is very small. Their
Hmm.
life experience against which they're measuring your behavior is tiny. So the only thing they can do is take that on board as meaning something negative about them. And
Right,
so you're right. First thing to do is to show them that you want to be there. You are there, so you might as well want to be there.
right.
And that makes such a difference because that kid can then grow in confidence, feeling safe
Hmm.
that, yes, this person has got me. They're going to look after me. I'm okay here.
Right.
Whereas if you have the sense that the person doesn't want to be there, how safe does that feel?
Hmm. Yeah,
You can't grow if you're not safe.
that's right. And it's funny, right? So like when you were saying, oh, it could have went really wrong. And, like kids still have to learn to regulate their emotions. So they will have times like even if you like for the most part, if you give a kid the time they need and the attention they need, when you tell them to go to bed, they'll go to bed. One, because they're tired, because they did a bunch of stuff, but they're satisfied. Now, some kids also have, depending on, their day might have a bigger appetite for the attention and then may not cooperate as well, but that's a different story. So there's a lot of times where you can actually leave a child to then do a task because they trust you. And so they want to show how trustworthy they are in return and will try to do the right thing for you.
And the other thing is sometimes the child needs the why.
Mhm.
And it's funny how many parents and caregivers get upset when a child wants to know the reason behind the instruction. And
Right.
yet, how do you deal with instruction? Because personally, I like to know why I'm doing
Hmm.
something. If you tell me that caffeine's bad for me, I want to know why. If you
Hmm.
tell me I can't drink coffee, I want to know why. It's not enough that you tell me because I don't have anything to hang that on.
Right.
I don't have a place to put that. It's not a disrespectful thing by any means. It's literally, okay, I hear you. Now give me the substance. Like, why do I need to do this? And funnily enough, kids with autism and adults with
Hmm.
autism will typically ask a lot of questions when they're asked to do something. And it's not an oppositional thing, it's not questioning your authority. It's because the way that brain is wired, they need all the information in order to be able to do the task correctly. They need
Hmm.
to know all the reasons for it, the whys, wherefores, and what have you. So it's detail that that person is asking you for. They're not challenging your authority. Any teachers listening to this, please hear me because it's so important. That kid doesn't want to annoy you. They're not in a position to do that. They just want to know what you're asking. It's
Hmm.
a bit like if you take yourself, if you are put in the middle of Mars and there's a bunch of Martians around and they clearly have expectations, but you don't understand what they're communicating to you. So you try a thing and then they get all agitated and mad. So you're like, okay, let me try a different thing, but you still don't really understand what they want. How well is that going to go? And how stressed is the person who is in the middle of the Martians? This
Yeah.
is the kid with autism. They're in the
Hmm.
midst of Martians who are getting agitated for no discernible reason. So if you do have something to do with somebody on the spectrum, try and see it from their point of view for a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not a very reasonable planet, this one. It's we speak in riddles. We don't use clear language, and we expect small people to understand the inference, and yet they have no life experience to get that from. And then we get mad when they don't get it.
Yeah.
We're not very fair, you
Yeah.
know?
It's like I said before, right? I shared this on the podcast before. I was listening to a guy get mad at his son. His son was like 2 or 3 years old, and he said to his child, "Don't you know better?" I'm like, how would the kid know better? Like,
Of
what
course, he
life
doesn't know
experience do you
better,
think this child has that they would know this?
right? And I had a friend. She kind of stopped talking to me a little while ago, but I had a friend whose child, she had a very complicated relationship with this kid.
Hmm.
But sometimes I would hear her literally screaming at him, "You don't know how lucky you are. You don't appreciate da 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 da."
Yeah.
And I would try telling her, "You're correct. He does
Hmm.
not know how lucky he is because he has nothing to measure it against. Wasn't that the point? You
Hmm.
wanted things to be better for him?" And no, he doesn't know how fortunate he is because again, he doesn't have anything to measure it against. Why are you yelling at him?
Yeah.
Like he doesn't, you're right. There's no need to yell, right? Like
Hmm.
he doesn't get it. Why would you expect him to? And we just fail in the reasonable side of things,
Yeah.
particularly when it comes to kids. We expect so much from these poor little souls who they don't want to annoy the big person who's supposed to keep them safe. They don't want to do that. It's not a game plan, but it happens because they're in a learning process.
Right.
So if we could give kids more space to be, they would grow into more functional adults. And if we could give each other more space to be, then maybe we'd enjoy each other's company more as a species,
Yeah.
right? Like right now, we're dealing with an awful lot of isolation coming from the pandemic.
Yeah.
Many people are opting to remain isolated because they've looked around and they don't like what they see.
Yeah.
And I understand that fully, but it's also like if we don't give each other a little space and try, reach out a little bit and think of the kid, if you don't give them room to grow,
Hmm.
where do we go from there? There's no awakening happening if you don't allow space.
Right. It's funny because that's my go-to answer for kids a lot of times when they're frustrated about something. I go, well, you're in your learning phase right now. I said, the reason you see the adults doing the things they do and why they know the things they do is because they had a learning phase as well. So that's where you are right now. So it's fine if you make a mistake and it's fine if you don't know something because that's the purpose of the time you're in your life.
Exactly. And understanding that is something that I wish more people had,
Mm.
or at least slowed down long enough to develop it. Because I think we go so fast that we just buy into these stories of these kids should know better, they should act their age, which when you examine that sentence, it
Mm.
really doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. Really, really doesn't.
Right. They're
And
usually acting
they
their
should
age. So
and you should know better. Why? Or the one where you have a sibling and you're told, well, you're older, you should know better.
yes,
Again, why? You
that's an
know,
interesting one because
it
so
is.
my youngest sister, she has four kids, but three of them are like really close in age, like 2.5 years max between the oldest and the youngest. And so the oldest one, her daughter, I remember someone had said to her, you're the oldest, you should know better. And I'm like, I told the person, she's 5. What exactly, how much superior knowledge do you think she has from the 3-year-old? How superior is her life knowledge at this moment that you're
Right.
expecting her to use the discipline of an adult, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. And going back to kids with autism for a moment, because that's a very nice sort of lead into this
Yeah.
piece. When looking to integrate a child into a regular classroom, for example, I have come across so many teachers who have really unreasonable expectations of this kid. They want them to behave better than the kids already do in the
Mm.
regular classroom.
Yeah.
They want the child with special needs to make extra special efforts all the time in order to fit in. And fitting in is a key thing here because it's a concept that needs to change. These
Yeah.
kids are not wallpaper. They are not chameleons. They
Yeah.
are individuals with functioning brains and they need to belong, not fit in. And that's such a different concept. Belonging simply means you are
Well,
who
that's
you
the
are,
thing.
you are how you are, and you're welcome. Fitting in means you change who you are so that nobody else is bothered.
Mhm.
I am so appalled by that approach. I can't even put it into words, and certainly not without swearing a lot.
Yeah. It's funny because you say that. I have a nephew with autism, although he's a level 1. I think that's how they do it now, level one, two, three. And it's interesting. It's interesting to interact with him because a lot of times you don't notice it because he masks. It's one of the things he
Which is
does. So
so
you don't,
sad.
so you don't, yes, and
Masking
so
is
you don't
sad.
notice it all the time. And I tell him, don't worry about masking. But we had a discussion on about the topic of fitting in and fitting in versus belonging. I said like because we were discussing something about trans people, and also I have trans relatives. But anyways, I have a variety of things to draw experience from. But I said if you really study people, here's what you're going to notice: people don't care that you're different. They do at first because they need to ascertain for themselves that you're not a danger. Once they realize you're not a danger, what you'll find really weird is that even the most conservative person will defend a trans person once they realize that trans person is not a danger to them in their way of life.
Hmm.
I mean,
Okay.
that's once they've ascertained it for themselves. Not everyone allows themselves to grow. But if someone is sincerely trying to go about the world, usually you'll find even if a person is different, people will usually accept them once they see they're not a danger. They may not agree with everything and they may not invite them to every barbecue, but generally they won't also give them a hard time. So I said, if you feel different, just, you know, give people time to know you. Don't always flare up. Like it's, like, because he will get mad. It's funny. I don't think he listens to the podcast, but if he does, sorry, dude, but I'm gonna out you on this one. he got reprimanded in school because he was frustrated, and he basically said everyone in the school board should be executed. So as you
Whoops.
might imagine, they brought him in for a chat. But because he was frustrated with school, and like, can I understand it? It makes sense because he grew up, he had to learn things independently because of his home life, the way it was. Like
Mhm.
it's the whole situation, right? Mom and dad had a kid, they don't live together, they don't even live in the same place, everyone has problems. So naturally, right? Already hard on a kid, then have a kid with autism. Bang. So, right, he was having a hard time adjusting to school, right? Adapting to the way school wants to do things. Makes sense. He's just doing things on his own. So, now he's got to follow everyone's instructions. So that's what I told him. I says, what you need to learn for yourself, not that they're not at fault, but to help yourself, show you're not a threat, basically. And that'll help you out. But like I said, not as in to blame him, but as in because they don't know you and they don't know the things you've been through, they're going to view you as a threat when you say something like execute all the school board members.
Right. Now, some of us will say things like, whoever designed that needs to be taken
Yeah.
out of the shop.
Yes. And
Like,
that's all he was doing. Yeah.
we will say that
Yeah.
as adults, and
Hmm.
we all understand the context pretty
Right.
much. But so it sounds like he's picked up the idea,
Yeah.
and it's the delivery that's a little bit,
Well,
you know,
that's the thing. Yeah.
untimely or strong.
Yeah.
But
Actually, though,
that
he's
again
had a
is
pretty interesting life and some pretty interesting influences. So
right.
it's
And
that you'd almost want to be careful if you didn't know him. If
uh-huh.
you start to hear about some of the people who were in his life when he was young, you'd kind of want to go, did he learn the wrong lessons? But like I said, right, I told him, I says,
I
just
have
yeah,
worked with kids with
yeah,
very, very colorful backgrounds,
mhm,
and I'm aware of how that
yeah,
can show up. But
yeah,
the bigger picture for teachers, caregivers, and
mhm,
so on is, just put yourself in their
yes,
position for a moment and see if what you're asking of them is fair. Are you actually being reasonable here? And one of the things that I like to point out to parents is, if your kid's banging pot lids together
mhm,
and that's annoying you and giving you a headache and you yell at them, what's happening is this kid is doing something for sensory input. They're,
mhm,
they're learning something about the sound and the vibration and the action and all those things. And you've just come over the top of that learning experience and yelled at them.
yeah,
Well, okay, that's a thing. But now what do you expect them to do with that information? So the child, chances are they don't understand why you're angry because it wasn't bothering them. So why is it bothering you? They don't have that information. And you told them to stop. Did you give them an alternative? Probably not. And go play quietly is not an alternative. So, what this kid needs is something else they can do that will get them that same learning experience in a way that you can handle. And I've yet to come across the parent that typically does give them something else to do that will meet that need. And so, what we end up with is a fight between the parent who feels that the child is deliberately annoying them, in air quotes, and the
mhm,
child who has no idea what the problem is, but now they're getting very upset because they know there's a lot of anger in the environment. And this is a very straightforward fix once you slow down and realize what's going on.
mhm,
And again, you can't have awareness if you don't slow down. Well, whether it's awareness of the child, awareness of what's around you, opening to spiritual awakening, you can't have any of those things if you don't slow down.
yeah,
You have to slow down to speed up.
mhm. And that's why I divide spiritual forces the way I do into knowing and doing, because all the qualities that do with knowing help you slow down, help you breathe, help you handle stressful situations. You'd almost think I thought about it for a while. But anyway, yeah. I'm actually glad that this took a turn into dealing with children. I have no idea why it did, but I'm glad we did because it's true, because it's one of those things. Like I always think like of if I'm going to teach someone, I try to take it from the parental model of I'm not here to grade you. I'm here to make sure you learn a skill. So to make sure someone
Nicely
learns a
said.
skill, you have to learn why they're having a hard time. So I take teaching from that perspective.
Yeah, and for behaviors,
Yeah.
because behavior analyst, that's what I
Mhm.
do. And one of the first things I like to correct, because language is important,
Mhm.
is your child's not behaving badly. They're actually behaving very well because they're
Right.
being really clear in their communication.
Mhm.
So it's a big behavior.
Right.
And if you think of it that way, if there is a big behavior, the child has a big problem that they are behaving for you. So
Right.
if you can't articulate something that's going on, either because you don't have the words or because you don't have the concept even, you're going to behave it.
Hmm.
And that is your communication. So whenever a kid is having behavioral issues, those are communicative. There's a
Yeah.
problem, and you need to figure out what that is, and then how to handle it from there in an effective way that's good for the child and socially acceptable, basically, is the sort of guidelines for it.
Hmm.
We have to look at why the child is behaving in that way. And we have a whole diagnosis that I think is rubbish as a diagnosis. And I don't believe it at all. And that's oppositional defiant
Right.
disorder. Twaddle. What
Mm.
you've got is a kid who's dealing with trauma. And
Right.
this is their response to trauma. But listen to the language again. If you have oppositional defiant disorder,
Hmm.
those three words say this child is a problem.
Yep.
Whereas this is a trauma response tells you this child has a problem. They're
Yep.
probably living in it. And that is a very different thing because with the diagnosis piece, we're
Hmm.
saying it's the kid's fault. Let's treat the kid
Right.
and probably not so kindly, right? Because they're being oppositional. Whereas if you look at it from the perspective that this child is dealing with an awful lot of ongoing trauma, how can we help?
Hmm.
It's a whole different perspective. And another clue to tell you that oppositional defiant disorder is bullspit is because when the kid turns 18, it changes. It becomes borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
Again, trauma.
Yeah.
But we're shifting blame. We're shifting responsibility, is probably the better word, from the people who are causing the issue to the person who's suffering it. And that goes right back to the victimhood thing that we've spoken about before. Who is a victim and who isn't? And we don't help this child to not be a victim if we label them.
Yeah.
You're
It's funny.
saying it's actually who you are and how you are, right?
Yeah.
Here, let's slap this obnoxious label on you, and now you're stuck with that. And everybody's going to look at you through that lens. How does that help that
Yeah.
kid move from victimhood?
Well, and it's funny because you say that to drag in a bunch of other family members. I also have a nephew who has low impulse control. But to basically save his life when he was born, he was premature. They gave him because he had meningitis. They gave him medication and they gave him some brain damage. And one of the things that to watch out for was low impulse control. And and I'm not to say anything against that diagnosis because I don't know fully what it entails, but I'll say this that so they're medicating him. But I told him, I said, listen, think about this. While you're taking your medication, realize these things. I have pissed you off as a babysitter so much, and you've never hit me. He's never lashed out at me, and I have frustrated him to no end. So I told him, I said, think about that for a second. Now, the person he does hit the most is his twin brother. They're fraternal twins. I says, and the reason you do that is because you have no issue with hitting him. You don't think it's an issue if you hit him, but you do think it's an issue if you hit me. So think about that for a second when you're thinking about impulse control, when people are telling you you have no impulse control or you have low impulse control. You've prioritized not hitting me, so your brain doesn't even give you the option to hit me.
And siblings do that.
Yeah. Well, that's the
That's
thing,
kind of
right?
my two boys are 2.5 years apart, and they used to fight
Mm.
like crazy, and now they share an apartment.
Mm.
And well, they're happy about that arrangement. It works on many levels. So, but kids do that. You
Yeah.
you slug the person closest to you, especially because there's a whole lot of extra rapport going on there
Yes.
and extra communication that nobody else knows about, especially with twins.
Yes.
So sure, I'd be astonished if you said that they weren't getting into fights. Like
But that's
that
what,
would be
yeah. I mean,
natural.
and that's what I mean. Like, so, but so he's on medication for low impulse control. But I'm like, well, first of all, if you're taking medication, that means you're not learning to control your impulses because the medication is doing the job for you.
Well, the assumption is he can't learn.
Right. And
That's
that's
the
why I pointed out to
assumption.
him, you've never hit me and you've never like, and I've never seen him hit anyone else who like, I'm not going to say he's never hit anyone who pisses him off, but he definitely has a line of who he hit, who he will, and who he won't hit. Like he doesn't just blindly hit everybody. He's not out of control. Like,
Yeah, and there's questions about that. Like for something like low impulse control, how old was he when he was diagnosed with that? Has he
oh,
been reassessed?
he's only 13 now, or he's 12 now.
Right. So how
He was
old was
like
he when he
six
was
or something,
assessed?
6 or 7, I think.
Well, a 6-year-old and a 12-year-old are not the same person,
Right.
and the life experience isn't the same. So really, does the treatment need to be the same?
Yeah, like I don't see him all the time, so I'm not gonna sit here like I'm not gonna say anything about diagnosis because I don't know. But I just thought to myself, as his uncle, I'm like, listen, maybe you do have that as a problem, maybe you don't. But from watching you, I know you have the ability to control your impulses. If it's, maybe it's not as good as someone else's, I don't know. But I know you can teach yourself, is was
So
my point to him.
here's the thing for something like that that is very behavioral,
Hmm.
right? In its manifestation, if you will.
Yeah.
That's something that my opinion, and this is not a medical
Mhm.
opinion,
Right.
this is an experience opinion though,
Mhm.
is it should be reevaluated from time to time
Right.
to see if whatever treatment you're doing, giving, taking is the same one now as it was then. Because
Well,
at a certain point, perhaps that changes.
mhm.
I've been working with a family. The parents both have a lot of trauma they're
Mhm.
dealing with, and they want to do the best they can for their child, and they're aware of the trauma, and their child has
Right.
autism.
Mhm.
And when I first started working with them, they couldn't go out of the house because this kid would completely melt down. And they thought they were damaging him, and there was all kinds of story going on there. Last year, they went, and I've worked with them for a couple of years now. Last year, they went to a different state to
Mhm.
a theme park. They flew on an airplane. They stayed in a completely different location to the one they live in. They went in this loud theme park, spent a week there, flew back. He didn't melt down once. Now, some of that is the work that the parents are doing with
Right.
him. I'm telling them, I'm helping them and they work with him. I'm not
Mhm.
working with him because I think it's more valuable for the parents to do the work. They're the ones
Actually, you
that
know
are
what?
there.
Can I stop you there for a second? This is a
Yeah.
big thing with me as well. Like it's people like even for WildFit, people ask me, "Can you do my child?" I'm like, "Listen, here's the deal. I'd rather you learn it
Uh-huh.
and then you live it and show the child
Yes.
than
100%.
me teach them directly."
Yes. I've had many parents say to me, "Will you work with my child?" And it's like, no, that's really inefficient. It's way better if I work with the parents because,
Mhm.
first of all, they can understand what I'm asking
Right.
and showing and telling. And then they, in real time, work within their own family
Yeah.
in a way that works for that
Yeah.
family,
And
right?
another reason I do it is because, like to the parents, I want you to be the ultimate source of wisdom for your kids as they're growing up. I don't want it to be me, a stranger, or me,
Right.
as someone who doesn't have a decision making over their life. I want you, the decision maker, to be seen as the wisest person. So even if I'm the one teaching it to you, I want you to be the wisest person in your child's life.
It just makes sense
Yeah.
because otherwise you're working with the kid for a couple of hours, maybe, or an
Hmm.
hour, or whatever it is. And then all the rest of the time, the parents who haven't learned the thing get to deal with the kid. That
Yeah.
is inefficient and ineffective.
Hmm.
But anyway, this child,
Yeah.
not only did he benefit from how the parents were
Right.
learning and working with him, and God love them, they showed up and did all the things. Like literally, I asked them to try a thing, they would try it. But the child's maturing.
Hmm.
So some of that would have gone away anyway.
Yeah.
Some things would have changed anyway, and they have helped to shape that. But the maturity happens. And so if you don't take that into consideration when treating a child, whether it's medically or behaviorally, then there could be a very large point that's missing, and that is the growth factor. Now, some things don't go away. Like if you have autism, you have autism, but your experience of autism changes as you get older,
Right.
and it brings different difficulties and different areas of ease. But we don't take that into consideration. It's like, okay, here's a pinpoint in the map, and that's the point of time where we decide this thing, and now you're stuck with it for life.
Yeah.
Again, where does the awareness come from in that journey? And how can you awaken if you've got a pin stuck in a map that keeps you stuck there? So we shouldn't do it to ourselves or to other people, and especially not to our kids. I think it is required that we don't do that to our kids.
I'll share this. This is funny this is my own story. So I only found out as an adult basically that I have dyslexia. But I was tested for it as a kid and I was given training to work with it as a kid. They never
Okay.
told my parents. They just took me a couple hours a week aside, told me what to do, and then I just used it and went on with my life. And I was an avid reader. I didn't have issues. I still weirdly have some issues. There's one that still vexes me to this day, and I don't know why I can't get it straightened out. There's a security protocol for computers, an internet one, and it's either Corba or Cobra. And I cannot for the life of me, even to this day, figure it out.
It's
But
it's
yeah,
funny, but
yeah,
those learning issues
yeah.
like dyslexia, I have dyscalculia, funnily
Okay.
enough.
Yeah.
And so that is numbers.
Hmm.
And sometimes people will say it's dyslexia of numbers, but that is to grossly underestimate what it is.
Right.
If you turn me around 3 times and tell me to go home, I'm
Mhm.
probably going to get lost.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have a sense of direction at all. I
Okay.
have no idea about north, south, east, west. I can't abide it when people give me those directions. I have enough going on with right and left.
Mm.
And it's also numbers. Like, I'll transpose numbers in a phone number, for example, and not realize I've done it. And that kind of thing. But it has a knock-on effect in so many areas. And it requires understanding rather than labeling.
Yeah.
Because labels, okay, first of all, labels are for insurance companies. That's number one.
Yeah.
Labels are for people to get services.
Hmm.
They are not for people to wear like a shield
Right.
or to hide behind or to be introduced as. Because the number of times I have come across somebody who says, "Oh, here's Tommy, he's autistic."
Mm.
Like, dude, really? Why are you telling me that?
Yeah. It's
Could you
funny.
just say, "This
Yeah.
is Tommy"? Like, do you have to give me that?
We went
What
through this
what
with
a
my nephew. Yeah.
thing.
We went through this with my nephew, and my brother told him, your diagnosis is for you. It's not
Mhm.
everyone else's problem. This is for you so that you know how to handle your situation. But it's not for everyone else to now suddenly treat you different. It's for you to learn for yourself. And then we've kind of reinforced that idea. This is you, this is just you given information so that you know how to deal with yourself. It's not for everyone else in the world to have to worry about. It's for you.
Well, it's nice to have the explanation as to why
Right.
you see things differently to other
Mhm.
people, but it's not less than
Right.
by any means. And I will fight anybody to the death of that one.
Yeah.
This the person with an autistic brain sees things differently, and thank goodness they do,
Hmm.
because those are the people who come up with the new way of doing things. Those are the people who can focus in on detail that the rest of us can't see. So we need the people who think differently. We need those people. Now, the fact that they come with some different behaviors or some
Hmm.
quirks, that's okay too. There's no reason why not.
Yeah.
And this is, it's a hill I will die on every day of the week because it's so important. We are such an intolerant species, really intolerant of anybody that doesn't look, think, and act like us. And look at how many responses you get if you say something that other people don't agree with. But these days, it can get nasty in a
Yeah.
hurry. I mean, I put a sentence on social media the other day. I'm going to say what it is. Why not? There was a very inflammatory post,
Hmm.
and my one comment was release the hostages.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any culture that should have a problem with that. It's a
No.
very basic, people who are being
Mhm.
held in captivity
Right.
unjustly and under nasty conditions ought
Hmm.
to be released. That is a very simple thing.
Hmm.
The response I got from that, though, was, cursing me out, wishing all kinds of terrible things on my head, and just, really requiring a return to sender spell. It was
Yeah.
it was that bad. And yet my sentence was not inflammatory. I don't consider it to be so.
No, neither do I. That's
It was a very basic human sentence. It was not political. It actually isn't political. It is a basic human sentence.
right.
People should not be in captivity, period. And I'm going to say that about any place that does
Mm.
this. But the response I got was there was no space to have that opinion. There was no space to make that statement. Wow. How far have we sunk at the moment? And
Yeah,
how high
it's
can we look at ourselves from here?
yeah. Because I used to run into something like that when 9/11 happened, September 11th, 2001, for people who aren't old enough to remember it. Like, so the planes were flown to the towers collapsed. And one of the first things that happened was basically all the essentially allied countries basically declared war on Afghanistan. I'm like, no one in Afghanistan did anything. Yes, the people of the Taliban who took responsibility for it, was it Taliban or Al Qaeda? Now I'm trying to think.
No, it was Al
Anyways,
Qaeda.
yeah. So Al Qaeda happened to have some people had to have had some of their people there, but Afghanistan itself did nothing, but yet Afghanistan paid the price for it. The whole 20 some odd years war there, and they didn't do anything. Like, and all the leaders basically left Afghanistan anyways early on. So all this stuff going on for 20 years, and none of the people you wanted are there. Like,
And, here's the quirk, if you
mm,
will, about the whole Afghanistan situation. The Taliban were trained by the CIA
yes,
in order to fight the Russians.
right.
And they took the training and turned around and, you know, took it against the people who trained them.
Yeah.
And so that's like a little bit of be careful what you wish for
But
because
that's
it
the whole
might
thing,
bite
right?
you.
But the biggest one, my first biggest issue was terrorism is a crime. So if the country itself is not committing the terrorism, which would be an act of war, but it's a group on its own, it's a crime. So the fact that like a dozen or more militaries got together to bomb a country, it's like, first of all, that's not even vaguely the response to the situation that's legal in the first place, because this was a crime issue and not a war act, an act of war, because no government was sanctioned the event. I'm like, just from a legal perspective, you guys messed up, but yet it was okay to
Mhm.
harm all these people, cause all these humanitarian crises.
Depends on who's doing it, right?
Right. And so
But
people would get mad at me for pointing that out, but I'm like, it's literally not a war crime. It was literally a criminal act, and the people should have been the people who had nothing to do with it shouldn't have lost their home, shouldn't have been killed, shouldn't have lost family, shouldn't have when they had nothing to do with anything. So it's like,
it's a topic that could
right.
honestly be an entire podcast in
Yes,
itself.
absolutely. Right.
But and of course it's controversial,
Mm.
but the question there is why is it so controversial to have any of these conversations? Because that's something, if you don't express your opinion and hear other people's coming back,
Mhm.
how do you move from where you are?
Yeah.
It's I find I get yelled at an awful lot because of various things that I say, but I don't hear a reasonable response where the person is trying to present to me their viewpoint. I don't get presented to, I get yelled at. And
Yeah.
that convinced nobody ever. So, in the political arena these days, I keep saying to people, look, quit yelling at me and just tell me why you think your guy
Mhm.
is the better one of the two. Not why the other one is worse.
Mm.
I am not interested to hear that. Why is yours so good? Tell me. And people can't answer that typically. You know,
Yeah.
that is my experience so far. And they try and do the fearful thing. Like, well, if you go here, you're going to get that. Not what I asked you. Let's go back to the question.
Yeah.
But we've lost the ability, first of all, to hold space for each other
Mm.
and just have different opinions without making it mean something sort of more than it is, right? And without being able to investigate. So there's no critical thinking happening. There's no sort of, like I said, holding space for each other
Right.
all right, I hear that this is where you are. This is where I am. Let's see if there's anything we do with this, or do we just agree to be where we are? Some things are too important to have that agreement, but other things easily you can. I have friends who have typically voted differently to how I vote
Mm.
and or have voted in the past.
Right.
That's fine. I don't have a problem with it because they have their reasons and their life
Mhm.
experience and their background and their things that tell them that that's the way to
Yeah.
go. And I have mine, and that's cool. But I'd like to be able to have a discussion in case I
Mhm.
need to move my stance or in case maybe they need to move
Well,
theirs.
and that's exactly it, right? How do I know if I'm in the wrong if we can't even discuss what I'm
Right.
doing wrong? Like, there
And you're
was
not going to
that.
convince me by yelling at me that I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to work. Thank you for your opinion. That gave me nothing useful.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, yeah, like from the political perspective, right? There was that kind of cliche of if you wanted to do something new, you let liberal-minded parties in, and if you wanted to fix finances, you let conservative-minded parties in. Which now parties are just those in name only. Like you can still see the behaviors, but
It's
generally
not the
they don't
same.
follow those patterns anymore. So,
Yeah, it's
like
not
I
the
think,
same anymore. It's a very different landscape driven by very different motives. But it's what we've lost is the ability to communicate with each other in a way that doesn't have to be, full volume and aggressive. And it's like, wow, people keep wishing all these bad things on me. It's like, I'm just going to send it straight back to you. So
yeah,
you might want to stop doing that.
yeah,
It's not going to go well. But it's just interesting to me that we have such a low level knee-jerk reaction.
mhm.
That's far from awakening. Moving in the opposite direction.
Yeah. It's funny to be less to put a less harmful or a less controversial statement, but still potentially controversial depending on who you are. I seen online someone who put a cartoon and it was like so it's God speaking and saying I'll make people to make sure that people are safe all the time. I'll make people who are up during the day and I'll make who get up early and to rise and do their things, and I'll get people who stay up late so that people are always there's always someone to watch. And then basically the next panel is okay, now if you don't get up early in the morning, you're lazy. And then God kind of doing a face plant thing or a face palm.
Right. And I did a podcast episode on the subject of laziness
Yeah. Yeah.
because I don't think it's real. I don't think laziness is a thing. It is what we label other people in order to
Mhm.
put them down.
Right.
And it's what we label other people in order to make them busy.
Yeah.
Who started that? I believe it was to do with slaves
Possibly.
when people were keeping slaves, and if the slaves stopped work, they were labeled as
Mhm.
lazy and then could be beaten for it, right?
Mhm.
But that's laziness has not always existed, the concept of it. And it's something that we use like a weapon. So if I tell you, okay, you know what, you're being really lazy,
Mhm.
then you're not going to feel good about yourself. You're going to be like, oh no, maybe I should be doing more, or okay, I'll get up now and I'll do a thing. But if you're taking rest, it's probably because you need rest.
Right.
Or maybe you're processing some information. Or maybe, there's a ton of reasons for rest, none of which need justifying, all of
Yeah.
which are valid, and some of which get mislabeled as laziness. I don't like it. It's a very aggressive term
Mhm.
and it's never kind.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? And so, well, even if we weren't specifically doing the topics of being as witches and wizards, because we both have an interest in human behavior,
Mhm.
one of the things when you start doing it seriously is you realize there's reasons for things.
Always.
And then so when you hear someone say something like someone's lazy, it's like, well, okay, well, no one inherently wants to be lazy. People want to recover from strenuous activities, but people like to be productive usually.
There's
That's
also,
the
did they sleep?
yeah.
Are they feeling well? Have they eaten? Do
Hmm.
they need to eat? Maybe they've been working a lot and now it's time to rest and recuperate. I
Right.
mean, you're somebody who's done a lot of physical fitness and so on. Where do your gains come in? The gains come
Here.
in not when you're in the gym, but on your rest day.
Right.
The people who don't take rest days and keep working out are the ones who get the injuries because they're not resting and recuperating. They're not rebuilding the micro tears in the muscles.
Yeah.
They're not rebuilding based on the work they've done. Well, that's there you go. That's pretty much
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
rest day where all the good stuff's happening is what we would call lazy in any other area.
It's funny because bringing up that topic. So there's some people have the philosophy of you work till failure, right? When you're
Ah,
lifting,
yes.
which takes longer to recover from.
And
Because
your form goes off, which is never
right.
a good thing.
And it's funny because so when I worked out, I didn't usually use a spotter, so I didn't max out my weights for my strength capacity. So what I would end up doing is just being very diligent in my technique. And I ended up getting all these great gains, and I'm like, but I'm not working to failure. But
Right.
what I realized is it's this is my refrain over and over and over again. Your subconscious mind has to trust your conscious mind. So if you show your subconscious mind you can do something, it will pour resources into what you're doing. So even though I wasn't using a great deal of weights, I ended up because I had lost my job, so I couldn't afford to go to the gym anymore, and I had ended up doing some roofing, and I was carrying 3 bundles of shingles, which depending on what you have is anywhere from 150 pounds to
Mhm.
210, and that's my regular up and down the ladder, like.
Right.
But I'm like, but I wasn't like benching, like I wasn't going to the gym and like trying to bench 200 or 300 or whatever. I was just putting my body through the motions, but doing it as diligently as I could. And yet here I went. I had gotten all these gains that I didn't realize because I wasn't doing in the gym to reflect it. But then
Right.
when I would work, I was like lifting all these weights and I'm like, holy cow, you know?
Yeah, there's a difference very often between what people tell you it ought to look like and
Mhm.
actually what works. And that's important too. But the concept of laziness is, yeah, it's a tool that people use to beat each other over the head with. It's never kind. It fits in with shame and blame, and those are not useful either. Because if you're in either place of shame or blame, then you can't take responsibility because you've been disempowered.
Right.
So rejecting the shame and the blame is a work that people need to take on so that they can get to a place of, okay, that thing happened to me, that was a terrible thing. Now what am I going to do to get out of where I am? And that's the responsibility piece. So you acknowledge, sure, yeah, this thing happened. Nobody's pretending it didn't, hopefully.
Hmm.
But the responsibility piece is, what are you going to do now?
Yeah.
And that's right back to, and reaching your awareness and your openness to receive and all those things. The question really is, if you have an awakening, what are you going to do now?
Hmm. Exactly. Which brings us back to our assignment. And so ask yourself, write it down if you have to. Write it down, draw a picture, because we've already discussed also that kind of concept. Whatever you do to remind yourself of things and to think things through, that's what I want you to do. Do that to help you focus on what you're going to do. I mean, it's a thought exercise because I'm not holding you to whatever you write down because you may discover it's something else after. But for now, think about where you're starting to focus yourself and where you've always been focusing yourself, and then hopefully share it. I mean, I'll put a link to I've shared the link to the podcast for so long now, for almost a year now, but
It's
I'll have
okay.
that in
Keep
the,
going.
in the show's notes.
We,
But yeah, and I'll have that in the
we
show
might
notes
have
because
new
new
people.
listeners, right, don't know.
Yep.
it's the fun of doing something. And even if you've done it for a long time, somebody new might come along and they don't know. So even though you've shared something over and over and over, a new listener or a new person might still need to hear it.
And
So that's our definitely our
sometimes,
assignment.
sometimes you can hear a thing and you
Hmm.
hear it 10 times, and then on time 11, it's like, oh, I got you.
Yeah.
And I mean, how many times has that happened to you? And you
Oh,
sort of left with a, did I not just tell you that like
yeah.
a dozen times? But sometimes it's a combination of what you're saying, how you're saying, and when you're
Yeah.
saying. And sometimes it just all comes
Yeah.
together and it drops in and the person's got it. Boom, that arrived. And
Yeah.
it's great when that happens, but you
Yeah.
can't dictate when that is.
I'll share two humorous stories. One is for me and one is my brother. And this to show exactly that. So if you've ever seen the Evil Dead franchise with Bruce Campbell, yeah,
A little. I
so
don't
he
tend to
worked at a
horror
place
movies
called
too
S
much.
Mart. Okay.
Okay.
He worked at a place called S Mart. So because it doesn't exist anymore, but there was a chain of stores called Kmart, and it was
Mm-hmm.
a play on that. And they had a slogan, shop smart, shop S Mart. Took me 25 years to realize what they were doing with that statement. I had been rewatching Evil Dead 3 again, and I heard the slogan and I'm like, shop smart. Geez, what's wrong with me? S Mart, smart.
Uh-huh.
And my brother had the same ish, something similar, but with the song The Gambler. And I think, to be fair to my brother, because the first time he heard the song, he seen it on the Muppet Show. So they
Uh-huh.
were, playing cards. They were actually playing cards. So my brother didn't realize it was about getting, you know, advice about how to life advice and not literally about gambling.
Oh
Him
yeah.
too
Well,
took 20 some years before it dawned on him.
how many of us get the lyrics wrong to a
Yeah.
song for several years and then, somebody will show you the real ones and it's like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure I want to change them now.
Yeah. It was just funny to show that, yeah, you can get it in the right context and suddenly it makes a difference. And that's what happened. Took me
Uh-huh.
25 years to figure out S smart was smart.
Sometimes that's the thing, and it's just
Yeah.
it's hilarious when it happens.
Well, it
But
was because everyone had a good laugh at my expense, but then I in turn had a good laugh at my brother's expense because about a week later that he had his epiphany, and I was like, "There you go."
uh-huh,
I
that
laugh at
that
you.
happens. That happens.
Yeah, but it was good. I think it's probably a good place to end the episode. I think.
Yeah, very cool. Everybody's got their assignment, and
Yeah,
it'll look different for each person. And I would love it if they give some feedback. That'd be very
yeah.
cool.
And remember, if you're depending on your podcatcher, I think that's what they call the apps that do. You can see a link that says "Send us a text" or "Send me a text," which if you don't want to share it in the subreddit, you can just send a text and then I see it and I can share it with Michaela. But so then you're not sharing it with everyone. I think the only place that doesn't have it is Spotify, and I'm not sure about Audible, but
Probably not audible, but that's just going based on Amazon has a lot of very,
yeah,
particular rules and
yeah. But pretty
regulations.
much most podcatchers, it shows up in the description, so you can just click on it.
Right.
So
Very cool.
because it's very important, and I'm actually glad Michaela brought it up. It's probably why you're being favorited, and it's not just because you're cute. I didn't
Oh
catch it the
my
first time you
goodness.
said it. That's why I didn't respond the first time. It's when I was listening to the episode again. I was like, "Oh, that's what she said."
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah,
See, there was another example, right? You didn't
yeah.
hear it the first time, you got it the second time.
For the listeners, it's funny because I have to listen to the podcast after we record just to make sure that the recording is fine. And it's funny. There's times where I'm thinking like, did me and Michaela like miss each other on this one? But then when I listen to it again, it's like, no, no, never mind. We either just took a different position, a different perspective,
Uh-huh.
or worded it differently. So sometimes I'm thinking like where I thought, wait, did we disagree here? No, no, we didn't. I just because I'm so busy focusing on, trying to make sure it runs good that I was like, oh, never mind. I was mistaken. We
But
did
that's
do
the
good.
whole thing. That's the
Yeah.
whole thing, right? We bring different perspectives
Right.
on the same topics.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the conversation that we've just been saying people typically aren't having.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And we need more of that.
Yeah.
We need a lot more communication and less yelling.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yelling is only if you need to protect yourself physically, or you're gonna need to max out your or no, what's the word? You got to max out your resources from your body, their use. That's what yelling is
Oh,
for.
yeah, like martial arts, you add to your force by yelling, but yelling at somebody because they said something that's not in line with you is, I'm gonna
Yeah.
say not productive,
You don't need those physical resources brought to play, so you're fine. You don't have to yell.
right? Yep.
All right. So I'm assuming you're going to be busy for a little bit. Still more busy things to do.
I may have. I got to revisit that client I mentioned before and just make
Mhm.
sure she's okay. Yeah.
Right. Not that everyone else needed to know that, but so
But now
what
they
is,
do.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's even though I had intended to stop, but you're right. We never know what needs to be said. And for those of you who remember episode 3, part 2, I was literally sensing someone listening to the podcast. So, and to be clear to people, right? They were listening in spiritually, not physically, because we hadn't shared the podcast yet. We were just recording it. So it was interesting. Like, these are weird things that happen when you start to get really developed spiritually. You start to set to feel other people's interests in you or their presence when they're focusing on you.
That
It's
that
not,
was an out there podcast episode. That was like there was a
it
lot
was,
going on in that
yeah.
one. It
It,
was,
it it left me and Michaela a little bit hesitant about what to do for the next episodes because it's like, did we just stretch our credibility with our listeners way too far with that one?
oh, we may have stretched it, but I think that's part of what we're here for too.
Yeah, and only to come back to do worse, to be even worse. So,
I think it's all good.
yeah, so it's good. Yeah, actually, it's funny because a few people have encouraged me to do more of that kind of stuff, to be more open about what's going on behind the scenes while we're recording. That's why I talk about the producers of the show more, quote
Okay.
unquote producers.
Well, what we're doing here is I would say groundbreaking in that we break ground every time we do it because we don't know where we're going with it. Um, and it's all honest stuff that's coming up. So
Yes.
make with it what you will, but this is what we have, and
Mm,
it is the absolute honest, most honest that we could be. And I mentioned earlier on that the word authentic is
mm.
overused. I may have not said it to you, it may have been the client before,
Well, you mentioned
but
it before.
but it is overused and it's
Mm,
misused because
mm,
people are always saying, be authentic, be who you are. And that's fine so long as you toe the line and agree with everything that the majority thinks. But the second your brand of authenticity is individual and
mm.
doesn't follow the crowd, now it's a problem.
Yeah.
So that's why I say it's overused and misused because people don't mean what they're saying. Boy, I would love it if we had more clear communication and people actually said what they meant and meant what they said. That
Yeah.
would be so nice.
It's a good add-in because anyone awakening is going to experience that if
Yes,
they haven't already experienced it many, many times, even without
yes.
awakening. Because I almost think it's a rite of passage in awakening. Why is everyone mad at me? Yeah, you're probably awakening.
No, it can be. And sometimes it's just that you realize that you've been following a trend or,
Mm,
a popular thing simply because that's a safe thing to do. And that's no longer viable. It's no longer something that you can tolerate for yourself. And you have to stop, put your feet down and say, you know what? No, I'm not
yeah.
going there. This is my direction. And that's when you find out who the people are who are telling you to be authentic without meaning it.
Mm,
Or perhaps they don't understand the word. Could be a little of each. But yeah.
yeah. It always makes me think of I think his name was Richard Jenny, who was a comedian. He ended up committing suicide. But one of his jokes was about relationship advice, and he always said, "You have to be sincere. If you can fake that, you're in."
Ah, yes, I've heard that one.
Yeah.
That is pretty
Yeah,
funny.
sincerity. If you can fake that, you're in.
Right. Not sure that's the note to leave it on, but maybe
No.
that's where we are leaving it.
But a good laugh is always a good. time. This is always a good note to end things on. So once again, I'm Daniel Dubois,
And I'm Michaela Gaffinstone.
and until next time.